What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Nemo Propaganda here, and I'm going to tell you guys right now, you're not ready for this one. You're not ready for this level of sound quality for this little money, straight up. This is the Willsenton R300B Plus single-ended Class A tube amplifier, and when you buy it from China Hi-Fi, it's $1,298. That is not a lot for this level of sound quality. We're going to do this review the same way we generally do. Let me get those main specs on screen. I'll tell you about unique features, what the amp sounds like, how it compares to some other amps in and around the same price, and how it compares to some more expensive tube amps in the $3,000+ price category. Note on the price, if you hop on Amazon and try to buy this, it's going to be $1,600. You don't want to do that. You want to buy it from China Hi-Fi. Over there, it's like $1,000 and change. Shipping's another like $300 and change. And on top of that, they offer a 6% discount if you pay via bank wire, which is at no cost to anyone in the US. So why not do that and save yourself 6%? I'll throw a screenshot up. I ran through their checkout, came out to $1,298. And that's with expedited shipping. That was 5 to 7 business days. So again, less than $1,300. Hell of a bargain here. What are some standout features? First and foremost, the casework and paintwork. I got this silver blue finish in front of me today. Beautiful machined front panel with little bits of kind of like this machined polished look. Little copper ring around here. It looks stunning, especially when it's turned on and lit up. I wish I could have it on right now, but guys, this is a small room. It already gets hot when I film in here. I can't have a tube amplifier on in my face generating that heat. I'll start sweating on camera, you know. The painted blue finish is top tier automotive grade. This looks so stunning in person. There's no orange peel to this. This looks like it's been wet sanded and color sanded and buffed. This is an incredible finish. I've never seen this kind of finish on a sub $5,000 product before in the hi-fi space. I've seen some very top tier, like $20,000 plus speakers that have paint of this quality on them. I've never seen an integrated amplifier even close to this price have this kind of painted finish on it. It looks phenomenal. There is also a more traditional all black if you're not into the silver and blue, but listen to me, do yourself a favor, step out of your comfort zone. If you're considering getting this amp, give this silver and blue a shot. It is just, it's amazing. I love it. I love it. Another unique feature for a tube amplifier, it's got home theater bypass. Yeah, you can plug a preamp into this thing and just use the amp section if you wanted to do that. I don't think most people would do that with a tube amp, but you have that option if you need that option for one reason or another. As I said, this is single-ended, pure Class A. You're getting 8 watts a channel. Around back, you have primarily your 4 inputs, and you have your 3 sets of speaker level terminals for 8 ohm, 4 ohm, or 16 ohm. And you're going to just use those taps based on which speakers you're using, guys. Real easy stuff. So the bias circuit is really easy to use. It's a manual bias. It was my first time using a manual bias. You just push one of these switches forward. The meter up front shows you where the tubes are. As far as their bias, there's a screw. You just kind of turn slightly in one direction or another to get the needle lined up. It's dummy proof. A kid can do it. Anyone can do it. If you've never owned a tube amp before, don't let manual bias scare you. I let it intimidate me for a long time, and then I tried it and I was like, oh my God, this is so easy. How could I have ever been apprehensive to such a simple and easy process? Honestly, kind of fun too, but I digress. The amp was already fully biased when I got it, but I still tinkered just to double check, you know? So let me tell you what it sounds like, guys. Let me tell you, you know, because this is where the magic is, okay? So what this amp is essentially is a trade-off. You trade big wattage and power for incredibly high quality sound for the money. That's the equation. That's what this amp is offering you. That's the deal on the table. If you don't have a massive room or incredibly difficult to drive speakers, you don't need 50, 100, 150 watts. You really don't. Most people don't realize this. Most people are using 2 or 3 watts, 4 or 5 watts, maybe 10. Don't get me wrong, there are certainly people using 50, 60, 75 watts, depending on your listening habits, your room size, your speaker, and so on and so forth. But I get comments from people all the time that ask me how speakers sound at 60 to 65 dB. You're maybe using 2 watts, maybe 1.5, depending on how far away you're sitting. That's not using much power at all, guys. So let's go over the sound signature. Starting with the treble region, mostly neutral in terms of treble quantity. I didn't find the treble to be bright. I didn't find it to be dark or rolled off. I didn't find it to be smooth or sharp. Mostly neutral. Good imaging, fairly wide imaging, fairly deep, fairly tall. And the imaging itself was, instead of being very like razor and pinpoint, it was like more diffuse and just kind of like wrapping around, hugging you. Moving down, oh, by the way, the treble quality, fairly refined for the money. Moving down to the mid-range, of course, tube amplifier. What do you expect? Holographics, yes, sir. This amp has the holographics. It has that warmth. It has that tonal richness. It sounds fantastic. Singers have breath, body, and presence to them. When you hear those vocalists, you can't believe this is just an 8 watt per channel tube amplifier. Mid-range, fantastic. It's emotionally engaging. I loved it. Moving down to the bass region, look, 8 watts a channel is not a tremendous amount of power. We can't expect crazy bass power and bass control. Bass was mostly a linear affair. It wasn't boosted in any particular frequency. Woofer control was fair, you know. If I dug into the volume knob with, say, 86 dB speakers, was I able to, you know, create a situation where it wasn't controlling the bass? Well, yeah, of course. You know what I mean? But when I was using speakers that were more designed for a tube amp, say something 90 dB sensitive or even 88 or 89 dB sensitive with lightweight moving mass, something like your Focal Aria, for example, I was able to get those speakers to fairly loud volumes with fairly good bass control, and just a fantastic, excellent holographic sound. So that's that's the treble, mid-range, and bass, right? Let's talk about that wattage a little bit more before we get into comparisons, because it is important. I was able to use, you know, speakers like the Platamon. That's a $6,000 pair speaker. And if an amplifier has any problems, any like noise to it, the Platamon will show you. This amp sounded fantastic with the Platamon. I didn't notice any issues. The Platamon's about 90 dB sensitive, so best believe this amp was able to drive the Platamon to plenty loud volumes, much louder than I have a personal taste for in this room. I also tried more inexpensive speakers like the Cerwin-Vega LA165. That's a $269 pair of speakers, and it's pretty darn good. And despite being fairly inexpensive, also 90 dB sensitive. So guess what, guys? It's not just expensive speakers or fancy speakers that are easy to drive. There are budget options too. The Cerwin-Vega LA165 with this amp, again, no issues. The bass was full, it was well controlled, the mid-range was organic, the high frequency sounded sweet. It was actually a shockingly good combination. And of course, I tried middle priced speakers as well, like my harder to drive ATC SCM11s. Sounded fantastic, couldn't get the most volume out of them. Those speakers are not very efficient, they are power hungry. I certainly was able to find the limits of the amplifier using the ATC SCM11. In my room, it was approaching about 85 dB, and the amp was like, this is all I got. But again, with something like 90 dB sensitive, I was not able to find the limit, not at least with my hearing comfort. Other speakers I tried, Totem Bison, that was a nice combination. That's a average to drive speaker. I would say it's not easy nor difficult. My Bucart S400 Mark II, those are 4 ohm speakers, average sensitivity. I was able to drive those just fine. Again, if I was trying to get big output out of them, I could certainly start to hear the limits of the ability to control the bass, but this was like, you know, 87 dB loudness with a speaker that's not very efficient and very bass heavy. So with a pairing that's not ideal, I think you'll find the limits of any low power tube amplifier. So you want to pair with care to some degree. And just to be clear, I have a much more expensive 8 watt per channel tube amplifier here as well. And it was a similar affair. If I used pairings that were not ideal, I was able to find its limits, so that I'm not knocking the Willsenton. I'm trying to help you as the potential customer if you're going to buy this amp to have a nice pairing. So what I'd recommend on the affordable side is, yeah, I would definitely recommend something like the inexpensive Cerwin-Vega LA165s, 90 dB sensitive. it's going to rock with this amplifier. I wouldn't recommend something harder to drive like the ATC SCM11. Despite how much I love that speaker, I would not recommend that with the Willsenton. Instead, for the Willsenton at that price, Triangle Comet 40th, that would be good. That's a fairly easy to drive speaker. Also the Triangle Borea Bro 3. What else here? Let me look around my room. Trying to see what sensitive speakers I have. Oh, on the more expensive side, the Cabas Murano. That's not a super easy to drive speaker, but it did just fine with this amp. So yeah, look, this is my suggestion. Try to get into the 88 dB and up category, and you should be just fine. This amp should be giving you plenty of output and volume, okay? Let's get into those comparisons because this is the reality. I've told you this thing sounds great. I've told you it punches above its weight. That's like for $1,298, the sound quality is incredible, but without comparisons, that's kind of hard to understand. So let's get those comparisons done to give some context to everything I've told you so far. Let's compare the Willsenton R300B Plus to a few $1,000 solid state integrateds that I've already reviewed, like the Iota VX SA40, the Emotiva TA2, or Outlaw RR2160, right? Those three amps, they're all solid state. They're all about $1,000. This is $1,298. So kind of similar ballpark in terms of price. Look, those solid state amps all have over 100 watts a channel. They all have tremendously more power and can play most speakers tremendously louder than something like the Willsenton R300B Plus. However, the Willsenton R300B Plus mid-range and treble is going to be of much higher quality overall compared to any of those three amplifiers. The treble is going to be sweeter. It's going to sound more organic and natural. It's going to sound more layered in the soundstage with more texture. The mid-range is going to be more holographic than all three of those amps. It's going to sound more organic. The singer's voice is going to have more breath, body, and realism to it. And it's going to be a more emotionally engaging experience overall. Those three amps will have better bass control, especially when pushed to the limit. Being solid state and having considerably more wattage, that's no surprise. So again, the offer the Willsenton R300B Plus makes to the customer is give away some of your wattage and I will give you really incredible sound quality in return. And it's not a bad deal. It's not a bad deal at all, guys. Let's compare the Willsenton R300B Plus to something a little more expensive. Let's do the Billy amp. That's about $2,000. That's a tube Class D hybrid. So it does have a considerable amount of power. That's another amp over 100 watts a channel. It's $2,000. This is $1,298. So the Billy amp is $700 more. Which one sounds better? The Willsenton actually does. And that's where the shocker begins, because it's kind of understandable that the Willsenton sounds better than the Emotiva TA2 or Iota VX SA40 or Outlaw RR2160. That's understandable. It's a tube amp. It's a couple $100 more expensive, but it does also sound better than the Billy amp. That's $2,000. The sounds are a little bit different though, so let's go over that. And again, the Billy amp being solid state Class D and tube hybrid does have some benefits of its own, so it's not just a cut and dry victory for the Willsenton. Let's get into it. Starting with the treble region and using the gold tubes for the Billy, standard tubes for the Willsenton. The treble on the Billy amp is going to be ever so slightly on the forward side of neutral. The Willsenton is going to be more neutral with its treble quantity. Both amplifiers give good clarity, detail, and detail retrieval. I will say the Billy amp will give you a little bit more detail. The Willsenton will be a little bit sweeter sounding and organic overall. Imaging on the Billy is more precise. Imaging on the Willsenton is more expansive and wraparound with a wider, deeper, and taller soundstage that lends and aids in having better holographics overall. Moving down to the bass, the Billy amp is going to have the better bass, obviously just having substantially more power. It's going to be able to drive speakers to much louder volumes, especially ones that are easier to drive. The Billy amp also does have some different features of its own that the Willsenton doesn't have, like subwoofer outputs and things like that. But overall, the big difference here is going to be that mid-range sweetness and realism and holographics that the Willsenton brings to the table, that the Billy amp has some of those, just not as much as the Willsenton. How does the Willsenton compare to stuff that's a lot more expensive, like the Brunoco Terra? That's $3,000. That's a South Korean tube amp. That's also 8 watts a channel. Or Thomas's EL34 tube amplifier. That's another $3,000 tube amplifier. Those are really good tube amplifiers. And I'll say this. The Willsenton is not embarrassed by the Brunoco Terra, and it's not embarrassed by Thomas's EL34 amp, but those are on a little bit of a higher level in many ways. I'll point out the key differences. All three of those tube amps, whether it be the Brunoco Terra, Thomas's EL34, or the Willsenton, all three have really fantastic mid-ranges with really good holographics. There are some slight differences, but overall their mid-range quality is really good. Moving to the treble region, all three of these amps have really fantastic treble regions, but they start to become a little bit different, with the Brunoco Terra having a much darker background. Going to sound a lot more effortless in that treble region than something like the Willsenton. That's, a lot cheaper. Thomas's EL34, I'm pointing over there because it's there on the floor. Thomas's EL34 amp is going to have a lot more detail and detail retrieval than something like the Willsenton R300B Plus. Again, look, that's no surprise. Thomas's amp and the Terra by Brunoco, those are both $3,000. So no surprise, they're going to have some benefits over the much more affordable Willsenton. But again, the Willsenton is not embarrassed. Those two more expensive amps are more effortless in their mid-range and in their treble. But as in terms of like holographics, just sweetness, emotional engagement, the three amps are on par with each other. It's just that ultimate resolution is better on those more expensive products, and that's no surprise. So that's that. Those are the comparisons, guys. I know some of you guys probably want me to compare it to the Choco. The Choco has had a revision, and I don't have the new version yet. So I promise you guys, when I get a review sample of the Choco, which is that's a $1,700 solid state integrated. When I review the Choco, I will talk about how it compares to the R300B Plus. I have not received that review sample yet. I'm trying to think if there's anything else you guys might want to know before I start wrapping up this video. I think I've told you just about everything I want to tell you about the R300B Plus by Willsenton. This was an absolute performer. And I'll say this, when I reviewed the Choco Ime, I said that was the best sound you can get for the money, and nothing cheaper would sound better. I'm going to go ahead and say the same thing for the Willsenton R300B Plus. For $1,300, technically $1,298 or less, I don't think you can get better sound quality. You can get more power. You can get more features. You definitely can't get more holographics. You're definitely not going to get a sweeter sound. You're definitely not going to get a more tonally rich or organic sound. As far as tonal quality goes, I think this is as good as it gets for this small sum of money. This is a fantastic piece. And again, that fit and finish, that paint was just marvelous. So this YouTube channel does have a free Discord server. Link is in the description if you want to hop in there. You can also ask your questions in the YouTube comments section. Please, if you ask me a question like, will this speaker work? Would this amp or something? Maybe let me know your listening habits, your room size. If you've got a 87 dB speaker, but you have a 30 by 20 foot room with 18 foot ceilings, for example, the answer is probably no. You're probably going to need a lot more power than this guy can offer. But if you got like a reasonable size room, figure 10 by 12, 8 or 9 foot ceilings, you got speakers that are 90 dB efficient. Yeah, this amp's going to freaking rock. For $1,298, it's going to blow you away. I'll tell you that. All right, I'm starting to ramble. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, take care.